A hush blanketed the workshop, pierced only by the brittle crackle of fluorescent tubes and the muffled thunder of artillery rolling across the Carolina night. Sarah sat cross-legged on the concrete floor, her blonde ponytail a pale comet tail beneath a bare-bulbed scrutiny. She looked small beside the hulking operators who lounged nearby, but the stillness in her frame radiated a gravity that bent every eye, even those determined to mock. A bent gas tube hissed as she freed it. The weapon's wounded breath became her metronome. Master Sergeant Derek Coleman, 6'2" of bruised ego and swagger, leaned against a steel rack, his smile thin as razor wire. "Want us to color code the instructions, sweetheart?" he drawled, letting the word dribble like venom onto the concrete. Laughter ricocheted off cinder block walls, yet not a muscle in Sarah's jaw twitched. Her restraint was a dam holding back an ocean. Coleman stalked closer, his boots thudding a drumbeat of derision. From a thigh pocket he produced a weathered Delta Force patch and dangled it above her bald head, as if baiting a stray dog. "Maybe you're better off in the armory building toys," he purred. An uneasy hush fell. The patch belonged to a legend, a specter rumored to have vanished 5 years ago on a Black Ops mission whispered about only in the hush of aircraft bays. But Coleman, blind to nuance, pressed on. Sarah's hands moved with hypnotic precision. Lever, twist, listen, breathe, until the rifle's bolt snapped home like a switchblade. She did not look up, yet her silence screamed louder than any retort, and the men, edgy now, searched her expression for the spark that would justify their scorn. None came. "Have you ever been judged before anyone knew your story?" A rasping voice inside her memory asked. Marcus Chen, David Rodriguez, James Thompson, forever whispering through time. Sarah tasted iron at the back of her throat and blinked once, anchoring herself in the present. 3 miles every dawn, she reminded herself. 1 mile for each fallen brother. She would not fracture in front of these men. Coleman, annoyed that his quarry refused to flinch, seized a neglected SR-25 sniper rifle from a pegboard and slammed it onto her bench. "Let's see if the ghost mechanic can earn her keep." The irony of the nickname flirted with prophecy. The rifle had been sabotaged. Bent gas tube, fouled chamber, sand-laced trigger group. A minefield of mechanical sins lay beneath its matte finish. Coleman folded his arms, certain of her failure. Sarah exhaled, a long, mournful sigh, as though communing with the soul of the battered weapon. Her eyes, gray as storm-tossed surf, flicked from barrel to optic mount. "Gas tubes off by 3 degrees, she murmured. "Buffer spring overstressed, chamber scored by cheap steel case rounds, scope mount hairline fractured at the 12 o'clock lug." Each diagnosis landed like a sniper's round. Operators traded wary glances. Those issues were invisible to casual inspection. "Lucky guesses," Coleman tried to joke, but the tremor beneath his words betrayed him. He lashed out instead, voice rising. "You one of those charity hires, playing soldier because you couldn't hack it in the real world?" A cruel chorus tittered, but faltered as Sarah's left hand tightened around a torquey wrench. Her knuckles blanched, and for 3 heartbeats the air grew arctic cold. Invisible danger coiled, eager to strike. She saw it all. 1 step, pivot, steel arc to Coleman's temple. 2 seconds to silence, but Marcus's dying words echoed. "We're better than our worst impulses, Ghost." The wrench clattered back to the bench, mercy over rage at a cost measured only by the tremor in her breath. From the periphery, Lieutenant Commander James Wilson watched the tableau, recognition dawning like sunrise. The contractor's stance, the barely perceptible SEAL team hand signals, he had seen them once outside Kandahar, where a shadow-swift operator dragged a half-burning Humvee crew from hellfire. He thumbed a secure phone, fragmented after-action reports scrolling beneath his gaze. Ghost, female, SEAL Team 9, missing, presumed dead, except here she was, disguised in grease-smudged coveralls. Across the room, the senior armorer, Frank Torres, shifted, eyes sharp, body angled to intercept any threat to Sarah. Another phantom, Wilson realized, an Overwatch partner hiding in plain sight. A network of ghosts ring the living. Guardians the world never noticed. Coleman, still oblivious, squared his shoulders to deliver another barb, but a voice cut the air, like a vibro blade. Chief Petty Officer Mitchell? Wilson called, stepping forward. The name detonated in the silence. Sarah's spine straightened. An entire range of hardened warriors felt the ground tilt underfoot. Wilson saluted, crisp and reverent. You pulled my squad from the kill zone in 19. I've owed you my life ever since. Gas rippled. The laughter died for good as operators snapped to attention. Memories slotting into place. Urban infiltration manuals bearing Ghost's signature techniques. Whispers of a woman who vanished after an ambush that claimed 3 teammates. Coleman paled. His cruelty had been aimed at royalty of their hidden kingdom. Slowly, deliberately, Sarah rolled up her sleeve. Moon-silver light fell across a tattooed trident, 4 stars glimmering above 3 etched names. Marcus Chen, David Rodriguez, James Thompson. Never forgotten. The ink bled remembrance and silent fury both. I came to serve quietly, she said, voice a cracked bell tolling in the night. Every weapon I mend might bring someone home. That is enough. Grief, hot and ancient, tremored through her words like distant artillery. Coleman's knees wobbled. The dam of denial burst. Thompson was my cousin, he whispered, tears unshed. Shame flooded his face as he dropped to one knee before the ghost he had mocked. And in that kneeling, the world shifted on its axis, setting the stage for a redemption neither of them yet understood. In the weeks that followed, whispers danced through the base like wildfire skipping across dry brush. The ghost walks among us, they said in hushed awe, reverent now. Gone was the laughter, replaced by sideways glances of respect, tinged with uncertainty. But for Sarah Mitchell, the silence remained her home. She arrived before sunrise, wading through dew-slicked grass with purpose, her breath coiling in the pre-dawn chill like smoke from a sacred flame. In her hands, she cradled death machines made to bring warriors home or send them to the grave. Each weapon told her its story in silence. Stress fractures where nerves failed, carbon scoring where fear burned too hot, ejection springs fatigue like overburdened hearts. Sarah listened with the devotion of a priestess interpreting scripture. Her fingers, precise and reverent, performed liturgies of salvation on bolt carriers and firing pins. She resurrected rifles as if raising comrades from the dead. But it wasn't the metal that haunted her. At night, beneath the low drone of aircraft and coyote howls, Sarah curled into the bunk of her steel and fiberglass trailer. A bare bulb flickered above her head, illuminating the faded photograph pinned to the wall, 3 faces frozen in time. Marcus, laughing with a cigarette dangling from his lips. David, head shaved clean and eyes alight with mischief. Thompson, stoic even then, arms folded as though guarding them all. Ghosts, everyone. And she, the last ember of a fire the world thought extinguished. They whispered to her in dreams, dreams that were too real, too loud. Sand crunched beneath boots as invisible hands tugged at her sleeves. Marcus would ask, "You still running?" David would nod at the rifles on the bench and smirk. "Still saving lives with your wrenches, Sarge?" And Thompson, always Thompson, would say nothing. Just watch. A silent sentinel in her storm. She awoke often drenched in sweat, her lungs gasping like a diver breaking the surface. Sometimes she could still feel the shrapnel in her ribs, even though the surgeons had long since pulled it free. Pain had become her companion, as familiar as her own heartbeat. Back on base, Coleman changed. Quiet at first, his transformation bloomed slowly, like a soldier unlearning hate. He no longer barked orders to impress. Instead, he observed, studied, and then he listened. It started one evening as twilight soaked the sky in blood and gold. Sarah was cleaning a Browning M2, 50 cal, her fingers stained in grease and solvent. Coleman stood nearby, arms folded, as though debating his own courage. "Thompson never talked about you," he said finally, voice raw. "But after hearing your name, I asked around. They said he stopped, eyes clouding. They said he died trying to save you." Sarah didn't look up. Her hands continued their sacred work, but her voice, when it came, was a wound reopened. "He threw himself on a drone when the fallback route was blocked. I told him to stand down. He disobeyed." A pause, heavy as grief. He always protected me, even from myself. Coleman knelt beside her, not out of submission, but solidarity. He picked up a cleaning rod, mimicking her movements clumsily. "Teach me," he whispered. And so they mended not just steel, but wounds too deep for field dressings. Across the base, Lieutenant Commander Wilson kept watch from afar. He had cleared Sarah's presence with top brass under an alias, sparing her the circus of exposure. But the past wasn't finished with her. In the silence of midnight, encrypted files opened on Wilson's tablet. Operation Wintervale, coordinates, survivors, one name marked MIA, others presumed KIA until now. Frank Torres entered quietly behind him, voice low. "They're activating Tier 0, he said. "The ones who buried Wintervale are nervous." Wilson didn't flinch. "Let them be." Torres hesitated. "They'll come for her. Maybe not today, but soon." Wilson's gaze darkened, glinting with something ancient. "Then let them come, and let the ghost rise." Dawn clawed its way across the horizon in jagged bands of orange and violet, painting Fort Bragg in surreal hues. A fog, thick as memory, clung to the ground as though trying to muffle the truth. Inside the armory, Sarah felt the disturbance before she saw it. The air pulsed, subtly off rhythm, like a heart under arrhythmia. Something was coming. Frank Torres stood near the back wall, stiff and unblinking. He had been up all night. Again. She caught the tension in his jaw, the white at his knuckles. Their eyes met, and though no words were spoken, an old battlefield language passed between them. The past had found them. The knock came shortly after 0600. Sharp, rhythmic, deliberate. Lieutenant Commander Wilson entered, flanked by two men in nondescript suits. Their badges weren't offered. Their eyes, calculating and hollow, flicked over every inch of the room before settling on Sarah. "Chief Mitchell," the taller of the suits said, voice as cold as dry ice. "We need you to come with us." She rose slowly, wiping her hands on a rag. Her heartbeat didn't spike. Her breath didn't change. But a storm was building behind her eyes. "What for?" she asked, gaze narrowing. "Unfinished business," the shorter man replied. "Operation Wintervale." The room dropped 10 degrees. Torres reached for a socket wrench, an old habit, a veiled threat, but Sarah raised a hand. "I'm not a ghost anymore," she said. "If this is about the mission, then speak plainly, or leave." But suits never spoke plainly. Instead, they presented a data slate, coordinates from the Hindu Kush, an audio file, crackling, almost unintelligible, except for a single anguished line. "Ghost. If you're hearing this, they lied to us. Wintervale was never shut down. They buried it, Sarah. They buried us." The voice. God help her, it was Marcus. Alive. Somehow. Her knees buckled, but she caught herself on the bench. 1,000 memories surged at once. Gunfire in tight corridors, the stench of burned nylon and melted skin. Marcus dragging a wounded Thompson through a collapsing bunker, the drone swarm closing in like a storm of locusts. "But we saw him die," she whispered. The suit's eyes didn't soften. "Apparently not. A signal pinged 3 weeks ago, deep inside a decommissioned Soviet relay station. Biometric code matched his file." Torres exhaled a curse. Wilson stepped forward. "You're not asking her. You're activating her." The suits nodded. "Tier 0 protocol. Ghost is being reactivated under direct joint command. This isn't a request. She's the only one who can complete the extraction." Sarah stood, her soul a maelstrom of disbelief and duty. Her fingers trembled once, then curled into fists. "If Marcus is alive," she said, "then I'm bringing him home." As she passed through the door with Wilson and Torres behind her, Coleman intercepted her path. He held out a worn patch, the same Delta insignia he once used to mock her. "I didn't earn this," he said, voice cracking. "But you did. Bring him back." She took it with a nod and vanished into the waiting Humvee, destiny thundering back to life beneath her boots. The C-130 roared above the Himalayan curtain, slicing through gale-force winds as if cleaving open the sky itself. Inside its hollow belly, Sarah sat cross-legged, her rifle disassembled beside her, every piece cradled like a prayer bead. Her gear was custom-fitted, zero extraneous weight, yet each pouch carried more than equipment. It bore memory, history, ghosts. Across from her, Wilson ran diagnostics on a sat-up link module, while Torres muttered final loadout instructions. Their team, though small, carried the weight of giants. Handpicked, silent, lethal. These weren't just operators, they were believers. Believers in Sarah. The mission was madness. A descent into a defunct Soviet-era relay base buried under 70 feet of rock, frost, and time. The place wasn't even on modern maps. Last officially touched in 1991, it was now a crypt, or perhaps a tomb. And yet Marcus's voice had called from its icy mouth. Sarah clutched the slate replay button again, just to hear it. "Ghost, they buried us." His voice was thinned by pain and static, but it was him. Older, changed, alive. The descent began under the thick cloak of night. Snow spiraled around them in horizontal sheets, the wind screaming like a warning long ignored. The chopper dropped them 2 clicks from the target zone. Any closer, and they'd alert whatever still breathed inside the stone skeleton. They moved like phantoms over ice, every step rehearsed in fire from missions past. The cliffs yawned beside them, a black abyss promising quick death. Sarah led the line, her breath slow, measured. With every crunch beneath her boots, she returned to that day, Wintervale's final hour. She remembered Marcus screaming for a fallback, Thompson bleeding out, David making the call to seal the tunnel to keep the hostiles at bay. She'd assumed Marcus died in the explosion, but if the audio was true, he must have been behind the blast line, trapped, forgotten. The entrance appeared as a jagged wound carved into the side of the mountain, partially collapsed, its steel blast doors contorted like melted wax. "Entry breach possible," Torres whispered, scanning with a thermal. No fresh heat signatures. They rappelled in. The descent wasn't just physical, it was spiritual, emotional. Every rusted stair, every echoing clang off iron grates took Sarah further from the person she'd become, and closer to the soldier she once was. The ghost, reborn. The corridors breathed, not with air, but memory. Bloodstains remained on walls, faded into rust. The charred remnants of a medkit, a broken NVG lens. Her chest tightened at the sight of a nameplate still hanging. Rodriguez. D, she touched it gently, then pressed forward. Then came the first twist. Inside the control room, a body sat slumped over a console, long decayed, but unmistakable in posture. Wilson scanned the dog tags and recoiled. "David Rodriguez," he whispered. "He wasn't vaporized. He survived the blast." And then a horror unfolded. Beside David was a hastily wired transmitter, fused into a biometric relay. It was connected to the base's reactor, a radiation-leaking, half-operational monstrosity. David had been manually sustaining signal boosts for years. "Oh my God," Sarah breathed. "He kept the beacon alive. He wanted someone to come. He knew Marcus was alive." David had held the line, alone, slowly dying from exposure, radiation, and starvation, just to whisper into the dark, "Don't forget him. Don't forget us." Sarah dropped to her knees beside the corpse. Tears slipped down her cheek and into the dust. "I'm here now," she whispered. "I'm sorry it took so long." Wilson placed a gloved hand on her shoulder. "He bought us this chance." A flicker, a movement in the thermal scope, down the corridor. Sarah stood instantly, the ghost fully returned. She raised her weapon, nodding to Torres. And with that, they moved forward, toward the last door, the final secret. They found Marcus in the lowest level, sub-level Theta, a cavernous chamber fused with half-finished wiring, shattered bulkheads, and frost-coated power cores humming with unnatural life. He was seated against the wall, shackled at wrist and ankle, his beard unkempt, skin pallid and streaked with scars that told a story no battlefield journal could contain. His eyes opened the moment Sarah stepped into the light. "About damn time," he rasped, voice dust and gravel. Sarah didn't move. The silence between them wasn't hesitation. It was the crashing of waves against time, pain, grief, and disbelief. The tears didn't come immediately. Instead, she dropped to one knee and gently touched his face, as though confirming he wasn't a hallucination carved by guilt. "I saw you die," she said, barely above a whisper. Marcus's eyes softened, and he leaned into her palm. "I almost did." The explosion sealed off the corridor, but a secondary breach threw me into the comms vault, crushed half my ribs. I blacked out for days. By the time I could crawl to the relay, the team was gone. And then he looked past her, toward the shadows. They came. Torres scanned the room. "Who?" Marcus's lips curled in a faint smile, one that did not reach his eyes. "The real architects of Wintervale. Not insurgents, not radicals. Something older. Government Black Tech Division. Think DARPA's deformed twin. They ran experiments here. Psychological warfare. Artificial memory implantation. Deep fakes of consciousness. We were never meant to survive." He pointed toward a glass tube half submerged in ice at the far wall. Inside floated something that looked almost human, except for the metal latticework wrapped through its skin like veins made of circuitry. "They wanted to clone the perfect soldier," Marcus murmured, "but the program fractured when it learned to think." David figured it out. He stopped them, sealed the lab, and stayed behind to block their signal. They've been trying to reactivate it ever since. And he laughed bitterly, I was their canary in the coal mine. I kept them talking, kept them from escaping. Wilson swore under his breath. And now we're inside the vault. Sarah's face was steel. Then we finish what David started. We burn it all. They moved quickly. Torres and Wilson wired C4 around the neural nexus, while Sarah freed Marcus, his legs shaking, but mind razor-sharp. He guided them through back channels and override systems like a man born of the architecture. Alarms began to wail, the base waking for the first time in a decade. Through shuddering hallways and collapsing beams, they sprinted toward the extraction point. But just as they reached the outer bay, a figure emerged from the smoke. Not human, not fully. It was her, the clone, the one made in Sarah's image. He was uncanny. The same eyes, same gait, but hollow, engineered. Marcus stepped in front, staggering. Don't, he begged. It's not her fault. It doesn't know what it is. But the clone raised its rifle, synthetic breath hissing. You are imposters. You are the virus. I am Ghost. Sarah's heart broke in that instant, not from fear, but from the unbearable sorrow of seeing her likeness perverted, twisted into a machine built for deception. She lowered her weapon. I'm not your enemy, she said gently. You were made from pain. You deserve more than this cage. For a moment, the clone's hand faltered, and in that sliver of hesitation, Torres triggered the final detonator sequence. The clone looked at Sarah one last time, not with hate, but something eerily close to longing, before the walls erupted in fire. The team was blown skyward by the blast backdraft, shrapnel catching their vests like rain. Wilson hauled Marcus over his shoulders. Sarah and Torres dragged each other toward the ridge, lungs burning from smoke and frost. Above them, the mountain cracked. Below, Wintervale died its final death. The medevac was a streak of thunder across the bleak morning sky. It found them huddled in the snow, bloodied and barely conscious but alive, triumph carved in bone and fire. Sarah lay on her back, staring up at the swirling clouds as if the heavens themselves might open and whisper absolution. Marcus was beside her, silent now, his face a map of agony and peace. The mission was complete, the past unearthed, the betrayal burned to ash beneath the mountain. But what came next was a question none of them were ready to ask. Back at Fort Bragg, debriefings unfolded behind locked doors. Files were sealed, questions buried, medals issued in secrecy. The brass wanted to forget Wintervale ever existed. But Sarah refused to let the truth die again. On the tarmac, Wilson met her with a grim nod. The suits are scrubbing everything, even Marcus's name. As far as they're concerned, you completed a rescue operation of strategic intelligence value and nothing more. She scoffed. They always did fear the truth more than the enemy. Torres stepped forward. But we know, and that's enough. Sarah turned toward Marcus, now seated in a wheelchair, wrapped in a thermal blanket, his eyes scanning the world like a man newly reborn. You good? She asked softly. He looked up, his grin lopsided. I died and came back. Can't be worse than basic training. They laughed, the sound fragile but genuine. Later, Sarah returned to the armory. The same steel benches, the same oil-stained floor. Yet everything felt different. She was no longer hiding. The ghost had not only returned, it had evolved. She pinned Marcus's dog tags on the wall beside David's and Thompson's. Below them, she added one final name. Ghost Echo Unit, recovered. Status, reborn. The soldiers who once mocked her now greeted her with nods of deference, even admiration. Coleman met her eyes without shame. You changed everything, he admitted. You reminded us what strength looks like. It's not just mine, she replied. It's theirs. I carry them every day. That night she walked the perimeter alone. The air was cool, stars glittering like shrapnel in the sky. She paused by the flagpole, wind tugging at her jacket, eyes turned skyward. I brought him back, she whispered to the dark. You can rest now. The wind shifted, warm and gentle. A presence lingered, whether memory or spirit she didn't know, but it brought her peace. The story of Ghost was never told in headlines or medals. It echoed in whispered legend, in the reverent way soldiers now handled their weapons, in the long looks passed between warriors who understood what it meant to endure. Sarah Mitchell, once buried beneath doubt and memory, now stood tall in legacy and truth. She was not a shadow. She was the flame that rose from ashes. If this story stirred something deep inside you, don't let it fade into silence. Like, subscribe, and share to honor the ghosts we carry. Comment below. Who would you bring back from the darkness? Let this be more than just a story. Let it be a movement of memory, meaning, and resilience. Because some legends don't die, they return.